ध्वनिर्वर्णा पदम् वाक्यमित्यास्पदचतुष्टयम् यस्याः सूक्ष्मादिभेदे वाग्देवीं तामुपास्महे।
The Electronic Media Production and Research Center EMPRC of Madhya Pradesh Bhoj Open University present an audio program on English literature. The title of audio program is Keat's Ode to Autumn. This audio program will be useful to the student of BA first year. It is based on the third unit of second paper titled Literature in English from 1750 to 1900 AD. To deliver the lecture on this topic, we have invited our subject expert Dr. Shubra Thripathi. Sound recorded, edited and presented by Amar Bahadur Yadav. Let's listen to the audio program Keat's Ode to Autumn.
This program is about John Keats's Ode to Autumn, who was a romantic poet. You are familiar with the word romantic, I'm sure. But in literature, it has a different and specific meaning. It is associated with the romantic movement in English poetry, which started around the last decade of 18th and the early part of 19th century. Let us understand what this movement was before we talk about John Keats and his ode. Towards the end of the 18th century, English poetry started showing certain tendencies which were not present earlier and were present in the poetry of poets like Thomas Gray, particularly his poem Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard. The element of imagination was a strong component in this kind of poetry. These poets were called pre-romantics. The changing trend was picked up later by some prominent poets like William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, Lord Byron, Percy Bysshe Shelley, and John Keats. So these poets are known as the major romantic poets. With these poets, the poetic scene in English literature completely changed and shifted to the realm of imagination and feelings. This change trend was called the Romantic movement, and the poets were called romantic poets. So I hope you now understand what is Romantic movement and who are romantic poets. They perceived the world around them with the eye of imagination, which went beyond the surface reality to comprehend the reality or truth hidden underneath, to discern what Wordsworth called, I quote, the wisdom of the spirit of the universe. These poets, the Romantic poets, had their own ideas about what poetry meant to them. For William Wordsworth, whom I just quoted, it was, I quote, spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. This is how Wordsworth described poetry. For Shelley, another romantic poet, prescribed for you, it was, I quote, the expression of the imagination. And Keats, whom we are going to talk about now, declared that, I quote again, I describe what I imagine. Therefore, the Romantic poets tried to depict the infinite through the finite world, the ideal in terms of the actual world. They had a different way of looking at the world around them, which was not rational but more intuitive and individualistic. So, if we want to describe Romanticism in literature, we can say it is all that attaches great importance to the power of imagination. You must have read the poems Tintern Abbey, written by William Wordsworth, and Frost at Midnight by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, as they are prescribed in your syllabus. In 1798, I repeat again, the year 1798, these poets, William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge, published a volume of poetry called The Lyrical Ballads. The publication of this volume announced the arrival of Romantic movement in English literature. William Wordsworth wrote a preface to the second edition of Lyrical Ballads, published in 1800, which is regarded as a literary manifesto of this movement, that is the Romantic movement in English poetry. John Keats, about whom we are going to talk in this program, was a poet who upheld this romantic tradition of poetry. Let us now talk about him and his poetry a bit. John Keats was born in 1795, 3 years before the publication of Wordsworth's and Coleridge's Lyrical Ballads that we have just mentioned, and died in 1821. So he was born in 1795 and he died in 1821. You can see that he died very young, at the age of just 26, due to tuberculosis. But in this short life, he wrote poems of extraordinary merit which earned him lasting fame. He is known for rich sensual imagery and verbal coinage, that is, his skill in word painting or his remarkable ability to convey his impressions received through the senses in words. That means whatever he saw around him or felt through his senses, he conveyed all those impressions through words of his poems. This quality is called sensuousness. This sensuousness is the most distinguishing quality of Keats's poetry. It is not that Keats became famous when he wrote these poems, or that he was appreciated instantly for his sensuousness. His early poems, particularly his long poem Endymion, was harshly criticized by literary critics. His most creative years were around 1819, when he wrote his famous odes, and these are On a Grecian Urn, On Melancholy, To a Nightingale, and the last, To Autumn, which is prescribed for you in your syllabus. Since we are talking about odes, let us understand first what is an ode. It is a particular kind of lyrical poem. It is a poem of address which has an elaborate structure. So, ode is a poem which has a lyrical or a musical quality, and in this poem, someone is being or something is being addressed to, or the poet is talking to someone or something. Since an ode is a poem of address, the poet addresses or is talking to someone or something or an idea also which is absent but which is addressed as if present and is able to respond to the poet's address. So this is what determines the ode from other kinds of poems. This technique or poetic device or figure of speech of addressing someone is called apostrophe, and it is used in odes. Now, Ode to Autumn of Keats is the shortest among the odes which he wrote, and you must have seen that it consists of only 3 stanzas. I would suggest that if you have the text with you, please keep it in front of you so that what I am going to say now makes sense to you. Coming back to Ode to Autumn, it is one of Keats's finest poems, and it is considered so by eminent critics like Harold Bloom, F.R. Lewis, and the poet Robert Bridges. The poem was composed on 21st September 1819 after a quiet Sunday walk through the stubble fields near Winchester. The poet John Keats wrote a letter to his close friend Reynolds, giving us a vivid description of the scene which inspired him to write this poem. And I now quote that passage, a very famous passage. Yesterday was a grand day for Winchester. How beautiful the season is now. How fine the air. A temperate sharpness about it. Really, without joking, chaste weather. Diane skies. I never liked stubble fields so much as now. Aye, better than the chilly green of the spring. Somehow a stubble plain looks warm, in the same way that some pictures look warm. This struck me so much in my Sunday's walk that I composed upon it. This is what Keats wrote to his friend, and this is the source of inspiration which inspired him to write the poem Ode to Autumn. When you will read the poem, if you have not already done so, you will find that Keats gives an extraordinary rich and vivid description of autumn. His rich store of sense impressions has been absorbed and transmuted through calm and meditative contemplation into lyrical poetic form. Therefore, the ode does not merely have sensuous pictorial details, but also has depth of meaning. It affirms the poet's faith in the process of change in life, not by proclaiming it explicitly, but by drawing us into self-explanatory experiences. The poem To Autumn consists of 3 stanzas, which I told earlier, and each stanza consists of 11 lines. Every stanza concentrates on a dominant aspect of autumn season, at the same time bearing relationship with other aspects. The first stanza describes nature and natural objects at their richest and ripest stage of development. So the first stanza concentrates on the aspect of autumn, which describes autumn in the ripest stage of development. Everything is ripe and rich. Some of the expressions in the first stanza which suggest this are, I quote now, and please note it in your or mark it in your text, mellow fruitfulness. The second one is, load and bless with fruit and wines, and fill all fruits with ripeness to the core. So he's talking about ripeness to the core. Another example is, to swell and goad. Another one, plump the hazel shell. When do hazel shells become plump? When they become ripe and they are rich. Sweet kernel. To set budding more, and clammy cells. These are the expressions which show that Keats is describing autumn at a stage when everything in nature is ripe and rich. There is a rich and vivid description of nature during autumn season without a tinge of sadness or impending death, as in the case of his other odes. Remember, the poet had TB, which was incurable in those days. His mother and brother had already died because of the disease. Therefore, in his other odes we find references to death, but not in the case of To Autumn. In this stanza, the poet perceives a process during autumn season, which, I quote again, loads, blesses, bends, fills, swells, plumps, and sets budding. These are some of the verbs which describe what the autumn season does. Autumn is personified and seen as an agricultural conspirer plotting secretly with the sun to bring ripeness to a stage of saturation. Nature provides in abundance during autumn, which is evident from the expression overbrim their clammy cells. That is, the bee's store of honey is overbrimming. There is a subtle implication about the passage of time also in the words, I quote again, later flowers, and again another expression, warm days will never cease. These expressions refer to the summer season which was just over. So there is an idea of the passage of time also. The first stanza is thus a very sensuous and lucid description of the abundant growth, richness and ripeness in nature which reaches its saturation during the autumn season. Now we come to the second stanza. In the second stanza, an imaginative element is added to this description of autumn. Here, autumn is personified. You remember we mentioned in the first part of this program that imagination was an important element in romantic poetry. So here we have autumn personified and imagined as a woman. Romantic poets laid stress on imagination, and that is the reason why Keats imagines autumn as a woman. The second stanza is a good example of this trait of romantic poets of laying stress on imagination. Here autumn is imagined as a woman sitting amid her store of abundant harvest. She is, in the words of the poet, I quote, sitting careless, her hair soft lifted by the winnowing wind. You can imagine a woman sitting amid harvest with the gentle breeze blowing and the woman's hair lifted by the air of that cool breeze. She is like the peasant girl, intoxicated by the fragrance of poppies infused in the air and overcome by the soft exhaustion of her own toil. She is exhausted because she has been toiling hard in the fields, gathering, winnowing, reaping and gleaning. These are some of the activities which the poet describes as autumn, the girl doing during the harvesting process. Then, autumn is imagined as a gleaner or a person who gathers ears of corn left over by the reaper. This girl, the gleaner, carries her load of the last leftover corn of the harvest so steadily and slowly as if almost motionless. Although she is moving, the final picture of autumn in this second stanza is of her passing by the cider press or the machine that takes out the juice of apples. She lingers to watch the drops of apple juice coming out slowly from the cider press. The image of liquid dripping out slowly also suggests the passing of time, slowly but steadily. It is a paradox of passing and lingering at the same time. Two opposing things, passing implies movement and lingering implies stopping of movement. So, Keats now uses a device in which he uses a paradox. He puts two opposing things together. In the first stanza, there was the reference to summer, which was over, if you remember, when we talked about late flowers. In the third and the final stanza, there is a reference to coming winter. So Keats actually links autumn with the summer season, which was just over, and the onset of winter, which will come after autumn. And this, in the final stanza, when he refers to winter, coming winter, he refers to the autumn harvest, which is almost over. When autumn harvest is over, very soon winter will set in. Like the earlier two stanzas, this stanza also has rich, vivid description of the scenes of autumn. But it also has a latent theme of transitoriness and mortality, which is symbolically represented in the passing of the day. Let us see how the poet achieves this. The poet John Keats makes us aware of the transience of the features of nature and natural phenomena by beginning the third stanza with the line, "Where are the songs of spring? Aye, where are they?" implying therefore that the music of spring was long over and now the music of sounds that can be heard in autumn is there. So the music of summer was over and the music of autumn is there. It also implies that change is the law of nature and one set of things follows another. The flowers and fruits of stanza 1 and 2 are replaced by clouds in the shape of bars or long stripes across the sky. It is twilight and the pink rays of light from the setting sun color the stubble or the stumps of grain or straw left in the field after reaping. Groups of tiny insects flying in marshy places among long-leaved plants produce sounds that appear like the chorus sung in the church and seems to be sad. Perhaps they are also aware of the passing of autumn season and so they are mourning it in their sad song. Some other sounds that contribute to the music of autumn are the bleating of young lambs, chirping of hedge cricket, another small insect, and also chirping of red robin, which is a kind of small bird, and swallows, a kind of migratory bird which goes to warmer places in winter. These swallows or small birds are gathering in the sky, perhaps to migrate. These creatures complete the picture of autumn harvest that Keats had vividly created. They are all aware of the fact that autumn will soon be over and winter will set in. So, each in its own way mourns their passing away or the impending end of autumn season. Once you have understood the basic ideas inherent in each stanza, I would suggest that you read the poem quietly and slowly. Try to recollect what is the theme of each stanza. Then you will be able to appreciate the beauty of the lines and expressions that have been quoted so far. In order to understand the sensuousness of Keats's poetry or the pictures and images he creates through his words, let us consider the poem once again. You will notice that there are two special qualities of his imagery. Imagery here means the images any poet builds by describing the experiences felt through the five senses, the sense of sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing. Whatever you perceive through these five senses, if you express it in words, it is imagery. Coming back to Ode to Autumn, you will notice that Keats's imagery in this poem is very comprehensive and very sensuous. By comprehensiveness, we mean that Keats gives a wide variety of sense impressions perceived through the five senses. We have already referred to these, but it is worthwhile to refer to them again. The richness and ripeness of fruits and the quality of fertility of autumn is depicted vividly in the first stanza. We are trying to recapitulate now. Now in this, consider lines 3 and 4 of the first stanza, which are, I quote, "To load and bless with fruit the vine that round the thatch eaves run," and lines 7, "Swell the gourd," and in line 8, "Plump the hazel shell with sweet kernel." The image that these lines produce is of softly swelling and plumping of fruit and nuts, and sweet kernel implies the release of sweet juice in our mouth. The lines evoke mental pictures and experiences. You can find more such examples in the poem. Notice the last line of the first stanza. 3 double M sounds are repeated in words like summer, o'er-brimmed, and clammy. The line is, I quote, "For summer has o'er-brimmed their clammy cells." This repetition of m sound or m sound produces the mental picture or the image of the humming of bees. The poet creates a sense of some more sounds skillfully by using words with soft sounds represented by letters F, R and S. That means f, r and s sounds. Consider the lines again and fill all fruit with ripeness to the core. This device of repeating sounds for musical effect and also producing mental pictures or imagery is called alliteration. 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 The v sound is repeated in winnowing wind. The v sound is repeated in the expression winnowing wind in line 15. Several such examples can be found in the poem. Read it again to grasp the imagery and think what picture it creates in your mind. We cannot fully appreciate the ode if we do not consider its structure. As told earlier, that it consists of 3 stanzas of 11 lines each. The first 4 lines of each stanza, called the quatrain, 4 lines of the stanza are called quatrain, Quatrain. So the first 4 lines rhyme alternately, that is A, B, A, B. You may note this down. The first line rhymes with the third and the second line rhymes with the fourth. So we call it the rhyme scheme as A, B, A, B. For example, in the first stanza, first line ends with fruitfulness and third with bless. So ness and bless rhyme together. Similarly, when sounds are similar at the end of the line, we call it a rhyme. Let us see line second. It ends in sun and the fourth ends in run. Again, sun and run rhyme together. Again, consider the rhyme scheme in the quatrain. The first 4 lines rhyme alternately. You may note it down. Then come to the next lines. Next 7 lines. So 4 lines and 7 lines, they make 11 lines of every stanza. The next 7 lines are called septet, S-E-P-T-E-T. A unit of 7 lines is called a septet. Now in this, the rhyme scheme is C-D-E, D-C-C-E. C-D-E, D-C-C-E. That is 5th, 9th and 10th rhyme together. 6th and 8th rhyme together and 7th and 11th rhyme together. I repeat, 5th, 9th and 10th, which is represented by C, they rhyme together. 6th and 8th, which are represented by D, they rhyme together. And 7th and 11th, represented by the letter E, they rhyme together. Let us examine lines 5th to 11th of the first stanza. Lines 5th, 9th, 10th end in rhyming words trees, bees, seas, which we denote by rhyme C. Lines 6th and 8th end in words core and more, denoted by rhyme D. And lines 7th and 11th end in shells and cells. We denote this by rhyme E. So, the final rhyming pattern of first stanza is, I repeat, the quatrain is A, B, A, B and the septet is C, D, E, D, C, C, E. Now, try and find the rhyming pattern of next 2 stanzas by examining the end sounds of last words of each line of stanzas 2 and 3. You will find the same rhyme scheme in stanza 3 too. A, B, A, B, C, D, E, D, C, C, E. But in second stanza, there is a slight variation. Here, in the second part of the septet, that is the last 4 lines, instead of D, C, C, E, we have C, double D, E. So this is how we determine the rhyming pattern of any poem, by examining the end sounds. Now I would like to briefly tell you what kind of questions can be put on this poem. First of all, you may have a short question on what is an ode. You have to describe there the form of ode. You may have a short question again on Keats's sensuousness to comment upon his imagery. But you may have a longer question to give a critical appreciation of the ode, or to examine the ode form in respect to Keats's Ode to Autumn, or you may have to discuss the theme of the ode and what does it say about the ideas that have been expressed. So, friends, we have talked about the sensuousness of Keats, we have talked about the structure of the ode, but before that we have understood what is an ode, what is romantic movement, who are romantic poets, and what qualities of romanticism are inherent in Keats's Ode to Autumn.
You were just listening an audio program, Keats' Ode to Autumn. Subject expert and a speaker was Dr. Shubra Thripathi. Announcer was Purva Sharma. This audio program was recorded, edited and presented by Amar Bahadur Yadav. This program was produced by the Electronic Media Production and Research Center EMPRC of Madhya Pradesh Bhoj Open University.